Hi geographers, so your next lesson in your new topic. So you looked at what the rock cycle was last lesson, and we're going to carry on thinking about what are the kind of distribution and features of the UK. So where are these different rocks across the UK and how does that affect different places. We're going to do a bit of exam practice this lesson. But to get you started, a couple of recap questions as always. So do your recap questions, pause this video, and then we'll go through some model answers in a second. First question is, name the 3 different types of rock that we study. Should be fairly straightforward. And then second is, which type of rock are the most resistant to erosion? Okay, so think about your rock cycle, think about some of the research that you've done as well. Use that. Okay, so your model answer. First one is obviously 3 types of rock are sedimentary, igneous and metamorphic rock. And then which type of rocks are the most resistant? Well, igneous are the most resistant to erosion, but metamorphic are also very hard rocks. Okay, so they are also resistant to erosion. Okay, so how might these rocks affect the landscape? What we'd like you guys to do is to look at this map of the UK, and we want you to have a think about where these rocks are. So in the exams they'll be asking you to describe the distribution of rock types across the UK. So what we'd like you to do is in your books just jot down your answers. So think about where you see a concentration of certain rock types, where there aren't other rock types, and then move on. Okay, so now that you've described where those rocks are, hopefully you've picked out that there's a high concentration of metamorphic and igneous in the north of Scotland, and there's a concentration of sedimentary rock in the southeast of the UK. Those are the main kind of things that we want you to pick out. We will now want you to think about how this geology matches to the landscape, because obviously different types of rock will have different types of landscapes. So pause this video and I want you to try and think which of these pictures would go with which type of area. So have a think to yourself, pause the video and then match them up to the areas. Okay, so as you can see, our highest mountains are found in Scotland, so Ben Nevis for example, lots of igneous rock, metamorphic rock, and that's because they are resistant to erosion. They don't get worn away and become sort of smaller, I guess. We've also got mountains in the north west of Wales, and then we've got some moors and upland areas down in Cornwall. Okay, we do have hills in areas with sedimentary rocks, sort of gently rolling hills. So Pennines are quite hilly around Yorkshire and so on, and we've got the South Downs around Brighton and the south of London. Okay, so it is hilly, but it is definitely not mountainous. And then we've got areas of lowland out in Norfolk, for example, where it is very flat. Okay. So then we want you to think about explaining the link between geology and the landscape. Why do we have this link? Why do we get these mountainous areas where we've got the hard rock and igneous rock, for example, and why do we have flatter topography where we have the sedimentary rock? Okay, so once you've had a bit of a think about the link between the landscape and the type of geology, we want you to actually go away and do a bit of research. Okay, so make a copy of the table below in your books, and then I want you to go away and find out what these 2 areas are like. So these are 2 examples. So the Grampian Mountains, they are upland areas. Okay, so think about or trying to find out where they are located and then a description of what they're like. So think about the topography, think about the number of people who live there maybe, think about the type of landscape that might be there. Then do the same for lowland areas. So we're looking at the Holderness coastline, where is it located, and then a description of what it is like. Again, think about population, think about the type of landscape, its topography, those sorts of things. I've put a couple of slides to help you out on the next two slides, so if you're a little bit unsure about that, do have a look at the slides and use them to help support your answers. Pause the video to go away and do your own research. Okay, so these are the Grampian Mountains, and you can see what a beautiful landscape they are. You've got a map in the bottom right corner of your slide, Grampian Mountains, so you should be able to describe where they are using that map. But think about using that picture to think about your population, think about the type of landscape that it is, and so on. And this is what you might see in the Holderness coastline. So very different type of landscape. Think about, again, what's that landscape like? How could you describe that to people who can't see the picture, for example? What could you say? Okay, so pause your video, finish your table, and then we'll look at some model answers. Okay, a couple of model answers here. So you should have a description of location. So northwest of the UK, up in Scotland, mountainous regions, so steep, rocky landscape, harsh landscape. We talked about that in the first lesson, and with a low population density, difficult for people to live in those areas. Whereas our lowland areas, Holderness coastline, east of the UK on the North Sea coast. It's flat land with soft rock cliffs that erode. You saw that in that picture, those cliffs collapsing in. So those people might be quite worried about their campervan site. And then a relatively high population density. Okay, not the highest, not compared to London, for example, but definitely higher than places like the Grampians. So add to your answers if you need to. Give yourself a tick. Well done if you've got your answers correct. Okay, so now we're going to look at an exam practice and really go through the detail of what we want to see from your answers. Think about some sample answers, some model answers, and then think about what kind of marks they get, and then you'll have your chance to do your own answer. So your question is, describe the landscape north of the Tees-Ex line with that to the south. So make your comparison. So thinking about this Tees-Ex line, this is a line that divides the uplands with the lowlands, okay, and it can be drawn across the UK. So there's a slight error in that question. So want a comparison between the landscape of that's north of the Tees-Ex line with that to the south, okay. So we're going to look at a few examples, then you're going to do it on your own, okay. So you've got your mark scheme on the right here, and then a sample answer at the bottom. I want you to pause the video, read through the sample answer, and then in your books explain what mark you would give sample answer 1. You might want to write down some annotations and think about the kind of things that they've done really well. Maybe think about the way that they could improve their answer, but think about what the mark scheme is asking for in that answer. Pause your video. Okay, so from this one we can see throughout that there's lots of really good evidence. So they're mentioning specific places, they're identifying places in both north of the Tees-Ex line and south. Okay, so specific places throughout, which is really great. They're making a clear point. Okay, so it's saying exactly what they're saying in terms of the landscapes. Okay, so we want to see sort of in your answers PEE, so some point, some evidence. This one, the question doesn't actually ask you for an explanation, so we don't need that in there. Okay, but think about your points and your evidence. So this one would in fact get 3 marks, so have a read through the examiner's feedback and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so sample answer 3, I want you to again have a read through, look at the mark scheme, and then have a go and say what marks you would give it and the reasons why. Pause your video and then write down your annotations. Okay, so this one, probably you've noticed that it's not quite as strong as the other answer, so a little bit weaker, but still got some evidence in there, which is good, but just not quite as in depth as the first one. Okay, so in terms of the examiner's feedback, there's a few named examples. The answer contains some oversimplification and errors about the position of some areas. Okay, so 2 marks for that. Okay, so now over to you guys. So you've seen 2 model answers, and you've seen some feedback from examiners. So what we want you to do is have a go at comparing the landscape. My mistake on there. Comparing the landscape north of the TZX line with that of the south. So making sure you've got those specific places mentioned, some comparisons between them, and use details from that. Okay. Alright, pause the video, have a go, make sure you're getting 4 marks. Well done everyone. Okay, so last thing, thinking about that feedback that you've got from your the examiners on that last one, we want you to do this question. So no guidance from me, just you having a go thinking about this question. I've realised I might be in the way here, so I'm going to move myself out. So think about your answers for this and how you're going to get 4 marks. So explain the population distribution of the UK. You're going to bring together information from the first 2 lessons of this unit. Think about what's going on in terms of the landscapes. Think about how that affects people and so on. So try to think about PQE paragraph. So what's the pattern? Can we quantify it? Can we spot any exceptions? The examiners really like that kind of thing in your answers. Okay, pause your video, have a go, 4 marks. Think about the kind of things that you've said for feedback on your other ones. Myself in all the wrong places here. Okay, so just check your answer. So for your answer, you should have in there included some statistics from the map. So you'll see in the corner you've got some figures which should be in your answer. We want to use keywords, so you're explaining what the pattern is in here. So you need to use keywords such as topography or igneous, metamorphic, sedimentary, hard, soft rock, those sorts of things. Okay, and then the last one, have you named some specific places? You should really know at least London. You should know places like the Grampians, Holderness coastline, and so on. So you should have a few named places in there. Alright, well done everyone. Lots of good exam practice today. Keep it up, and we will see you shortly. Well done.